Sun Ra, Life and Impact in Retrospect by Caden Lewis. Sun Ra was born in 1914, a fact that wasn't known until far later into his life. For years, people could only surmise that he was born between the years 1910 and 1918. This foreshadows the bizarre nature of this man. Originally named Herman P. Blount, his first name being inspired by a favorite vaudeville actor named Black Herman that his mother was a very big fan of. He was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, though he claimed that he only grew up in Birmingham and was actually born on Saturn. Growing up, Sun Ra was an excellent pianist, even going so far to compose his own pieces by the time he was 12. While in school, he studied under Fess Wheatley, a man who helped form many smaller musicians who would go on to work with Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, and Billie Holiday, just to name a few. Sun Ra excelled in school, even making the honor roll, but his social life was practically vacant. Being bookish, Sun Ra joined the Black Masonic Lodge in his teens, one of the few places in the deeply segregated South that had a wide variety of books available to black youth. The books weren't the only draw. Sun Ra was engrossed in the many esoteric texts that pertained to Freemasonry and related concepts. These esoteric ideas would go on to shape the man he would eventually become. Sun Ra was offered his first musical job by his biology teacher from high school. Unfortunately, she became sick in the middle of the tour, and Sun Ra took over, eventually renaming the group the Sonny Blount Orchestra. He toured for a few more months before the group was dissolved because they were, unfortunately, in the red. It was during college that he had a vision saying, "My whole body changed into something else. I could see through myself, and I went up. I wasn't in human form. I landed on a planet that I identified as Saturn. They teleported me, and I was down on a huge stage with them. They wanted to talk with me. They had one little antenna on each ear, a little antenna over each eye. They talked to me. They told me to stop, because there was going to be great trouble in schools. The world was going into complete chaos. I would speak, and the world would listen." That's what they told me. After this transcendental moment, Sun Ra dropped out of college and deeply pursued his career. After a whole fiasco that occurred in which he rejected going to the army due to being a conscientious objector, he was forced to work for the government's forestry service in Pennsylvania. After being allowed to go home, he felt the clarion call of Chicago beckoning him forth. After getting to Chicago, Sun Ra performed with Fletcher Henderson for a time at the Club de Lisa. His music from this period had shades of bebop, but Henderson's band rigidly opposed the sound. In 1948, Sun Ra played with Coleman Hawkins for a brief moment. It was also during this time that he began to become deeply interested in ancient Egypt. In 1942, he formed the Space Trio and changed his name legally to Le Sonny Ra. By the end of the 50s, he had released his first 3 albums, of which the real standout is Jazz in Silhouette, which has some extremely interesting sounds that really incorporate some of the laid-back, cool jazz sounds, but with a very unique spaciness and timeless quality that makes the album feel like it could have occurred in the early jazz years or maybe in the distant future. Nonetheless, it occurs far out into space. Many critics regard this as his best work, but this might be due to the strange jazz fusion direction that he went into after this album. It was also during these years that Sun Ra's iconic and bizarre costume work came into play. Him and his bandmates could be seen wearing Egyptian headdresses and science fiction themed costumes. Sun Ra published many albums during the ensuing years, all the way up to his death in 1993. He was one of the first jazzy musicians to incorporate synthesizers and uncommon instruments into his music. He was definitely one of the ones at the forefront of jazz fusion. He recorded his pioneering jazz fusion album Atlantis in 1969, which has lots of very interesting soundscapes and patterns that are kind of textural. This happened. It also incorporated a lot of electric guitars and synthesizers. This almost happened a year before Miles Davis's revolutionary album Bitches Brew. In 1974, Sun Ra released a movie called Space is the Place, in which Sun Ra faces down a pimp in a game of cards over the fate of the black race. Sun Ra's cultural impact is most easily seen through the lens of Afrofuturism, a movement that delves into the meeting places of African culture with science and technology. Sun Ra's extraterrestrial and Egyptian style affected the likes of Pharaoh Sanders, Parliament Funkadelic, and many more. It may be said that the Afrofuturist movement came into being at his behest. More recently, some artists like Del the Funky Homo Sapiens, Deltron 3030, and Madlib, some of his songs are heavily inspired by Sun Ra. All in all, very interesting man.